It's Monday, January 20th.
The day we save our nation and begin to make America great again.
Inauguration Day. Donald Trump will be sworn in today as the 47th President of the United States.
We will use all tools in our toolbox to ensure that we're protecting Canadian workers and Canadian industry.
Ready to act. Ottawa says they are prepared for anything when it comes to President-elect Donald Trump's threats of 25% tariffs. It's not clear yet if they'll be enacted today. The first steps of freedom. 3 Israeli hostages are back home, and 90 Palestinian prisoners have been released so far in the first phase of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and hostage deal.
We are not going to let anyone disrupt our democracy.
A rocky start. Former Finance Minister Freeland confronted by protesters at her Liberal leadership campaign launch. Stay with us, Canada. Your morning starts right now. Good morning, Canada, and welcome to Your Morning. I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake.
Good morning, I'm Lindsey Deluce.
Hey, Lindsay. Hey, Anne-Marie. Good morning.
hi.
I'm Kelsey McEwen. Great to have you back
Nice to
after
be
a day
back.
off on Friday.
Yeah.
Big news day today. Obviously, lots
I
happening.
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Where to start?
where to start, really? There's so much to talk about today, so let's get right into it. Donald Trump is being sworn in today as the 47th President of the United States.
Within hours of taking office, I will sign dozens of executive orders, close to 100 to be exact, many of which I will be describing in my address.
Donald Trump promising the most extraordinary first 100 days of any presidency. Trump's swearing in has been moved indoors to the Capitol Rotunda because of the cold weather. This is the first time it's been moved inside since 1985. That was the year Ronald Reagan was inaugurated. So crowds will gather inside the Capital One Arena instead of on the National Mall to view the inauguration. And Donald Trump says he will stop by the arena after he's sworn in. Donald Trump's return to the White House, unprecedented after overcoming impeachment trials, a felony conviction, an indictment for attempting to overturn the 2020 election loss, and 2 assassination attempts.
The border security measures I will outline in my inaugural address tomorrow will be the most aggressive, sweeping effort to restore our borders.
Donald Trump is pledging to crack down on immigration. This was him at a rally Sunday in Washington. He told thousands of supporters, quote, "By the time the sun sets tomorrow, the invasion of our borders will have come to a halt."
We will quickly defeat the inflation crisis and unlock the liquid gold. You know what liquid gold is? We have more than anybody under our feet. In other words, we will drill, baby drill, and get those prices down, and everything else is going to follow.
This was during a dinner last night in Washington. President-elect Trump promising to bring quick change to the country by cutting back on immigration, enacting tariffs, and rolling back other Biden-era policies, including climate change initiatives. So if Donald Trump does go ahead with the promised 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, it will obviously cost people in the U.S. as well.
If a dog bed is at $150 and you're looking at spending well over $200 for that same item, given tariffs coming in, consumers are going to think twice.
This business owner says she'll have no choice but to pass the added costs of imported items on to her customers. Canada isn't the only country Donald Trump has tariff plans for. The incoming U.S. president says he will slap tariffs on all Mexican goods as well. Donald Trump also pledging an additional 10% tariff on goods from China. His nominee for Treasury Secretary told a Senate confirmation hearing that Donald Trump plans on using tariffs to take on unfair trade practices, using tariffs as a negotiating tactic. Meanwhile, the federal government in Canada insists they're prepared to act if Donald Trump follows through on those tariffs.
Regardless of the decision that President-elect Trump makes when he is inaugurated, Canada will be ready.
Transport and Internal Trade Minister Nita Anand saying on CTV's Question Period that retaliatory measures are ready. Ottawa is promising a 3-phased response. It could begin rolling out today, depending on what Trump does. Minister Anand says that if pushed, Canada's response will be, quote, the single largest trade blow the U.S. economy has ever endured. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith will not be attending today's inauguration after all. Since it was moved inside because of the cold, most ticketed guests can no longer be there in person. Premier Smith is in Washington on a diplomatic trip. She was scheduled to attend. Her press secretary says she'll be at the event at the Canadian Embassy instead. And CTV will have full coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump today. That will start at 10 a.m. Eastern on CTV, CTV News Channel, and online at ctvnews.ca. In other news today, the first phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is underway with the release of hostages and prisoners. Oh my goodness. What a moment. 3 Israeli hostages are back home after being held for 471 days. Doron Steinbacher, Emily Damari, Romi Gonen, reunited with their loved ones. Meanwhile, 90 Palestinian prisoners have also been released. Most of those prisoners are women and teenage boys. Around 100 Israeli hostages are still being held in Gaza, while almost 2,000 Palestinians are expected to be released over the first phase of this deal over the next couple of weeks. So people gathered at a rally in Toronto celebrating the release of the 3 Israeli hostages from Hamas. This group has been gathering every weekend since the war started, calling for the release of hostages. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland had a difficult time getting a word in at her Liberal leadership campaign launch.
I am so glad to be here at the St. Albans Boys and Girls Club today.
So protesters repeatedly criticized her support of Israel, called for a complete weapons embargo. More than a dozen people were kicked out of the event. Chrystia Freeland is describing herself as a fighter and the best fit to take on Trump's tariff threat. She's also trying to distance herself from Prime Minister Trudeau. She says she plans to scrap the consumer carbon tax, for example.
I'm a mother who has to live in this economy. I'm a person who understands what Canadians are going through.
Meanwhile, Government House Leader Karina Gould also launched her campaign Sunday. She says she's stepping down as House Leader to focus on the leadership race. She's already tried to separate herself from Freeland. Gould says she won't scrap the carbon tax, but is planning to freeze it and would cancel a planned April 1st increase. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are going after Freeland and Gould's close association with Trudeau with an ad campaign with the tagline, we can see it there, just like Justin. There are frigid conditions in most of Canada this morning.
We're going to see temperatures that are not record-breaking temperatures, but they certainly are colder than we've seen this year so far and all of last winter.
It's cold, like that. That's what you need to dress like. Environment Canada has issued extreme cold warnings for most of the prairies, as well as parts of Ontario, Quebec, into New Brunswick, Labrador as well. Shelters across the country are bracing for increases in people seeking help. Some parts of the country will feel like minus 40 with the wind chill. Kelsey obviously will have all the details of what you need to know coming up. A French court has ruled a woman can keep her adopted wild boar. Whoa, big boar. Roulette, maybe, was found as a tiny piglet, abandoned, and her owner has taken care of her ever since. There were attempts made to, I know, are they snuggling? Made to release the boar back into the wild, but those failed. So instead, Roulette's owner...
So she came back.
She came back the very next day, just like that cat in that song. Yeah. Roulette's owner had her sterilized and vaccinated, gave her a proper home, made attempts to get legal authorization to keep her. Oh, there's been rallies. Those failed at first, but after public outcry, when she was going to be taken away, possibly even euthanized, the court said, you know what? I favor the boar. You can stay with your owner.